Hello, I'd like to explain what I'm calling the dirt on Tier 1 notification, which has been proposed by Biosecurity Tasmania to apply to people who are producing berries, leafy vegetables, which includes herbs and melons in Tasmania. In this video, I'm going to overview who and what activities fall within this Tier 1 category. I'll go over what Tier 1 will require, and I'll finish with some alternative suggestions that in my view are proportionate and appropriate. The purpose of this video is to encourage you to make up your own mind and make your own submission. Submissions close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of July 2026. So we do have an opportunity to tell Biosecurity if we want things to be different to what they've proposed. I realised I haven't introduced myself in my other videos this round. My name's Olivia Rundle. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Tasmania. I'm producing these videos because I think it's really important that everybody who grows food is aware of these proposals and has the opportunity to participate. If you'd like to contact me, it's much better to email me at my work address rather than messaging me on social media. Okay, so there's 3 sets of activities that fall within Tier 1 notification. The first are many normal activities that those of us who grow food at our homes participate in. So while I am able to share for no money my excess produce with friends, families and neighbours, if I take that same produce down to my community food swap gathering, according to Biosecurity Tasmania, that is distributing or supplying my community more generally, and it falls within the regulatory system in Tier 1. Now, the assumption is that I'm home growing on less than 1 hectare of land. If I advertise my produce to give away on social media, by email or newsletter, again to the broader community, that falls within Tier 1. If I'm selling to anyone, whether I know them or not, also if I donate my produce to my local community house, to my local school, to an aged care facility, that is a Tier 1 activity. If I offer any produce for sale at a roadside stall, at a local market, and by retail or wholesale, then that falls within Tier 1. And if I give, barter or sell produce to anybody who is operating a food business or a horticultural produce business, then that falls within Tier 1. So that's if I'm giving my berries that would otherwise be wasted to a jam maker who sells their jam, then my activity is regulated. If I was operating an agritourism business, so I had a B&B and I provide fresh herbs for that I grow for the people who stay in my accommodation to put on their breakfast, then that falls within Tier 1. The second category of activities that fall within Tier 1 are not-for-profit community activities. So lots of people are wondering about how does this affect our community garden, our neighbourhood house, our men's or women's shed, our school kitchen garden, or charity or fundraising produce sales, which schools often have, and other organisations. So where produce is sold for charitable or fundraising purposes. All of those activities have been confirmed by Biosecurity Tasmania to fall within this Tier 1 notification category. They are not going to be exempt from the system. And the third category who fall within Tier 1 are small commercial producers. Well, actually, it's large berry producers as well. So any berry producer, however small or large, who is not required to be accredited under a different food safety scheme falls within the Tier 1 notification category. Any commercial producer of leafy vegetables or melons, so this is the first tier, so it ranges from the restaurant that has one pot of herbs on the windowsill that it uses to garnish things that are produced in that kitchen, to somebody who's running a market garden up to 1 hectare of cultivation area. All of those commercial producers fall within this category. So a lot of market gardeners are going to fall into Tier 1. Many suggested, so the stakeholder feedback to biosecurity very clearly preferred that this category would apply to people cultivating up to 2 hectares. That was the feedback from the small producer sector, that was a reasonable and appropriate size. For reasons they have not explained, Biosecurity Tasmania has departed from that 2 hectare level, which applies, for example, in New South Wales, and they are applying Tier 1 only to people growing up to 1 hectare. So paddock to plate agritourism businesses who grow their own produce will fall within Tier 1 and be required to meet the requirements. And restaurants, cafes or accommodation providers, as I mentioned, who grow produce, regulated produce to serve to customers. So that is who and what activities fall within this Tier 1 category. So now let's dive down into what's the big deal. So biosecurity clearly has a view that their Tier 1 notification is not onerous and it is scale appropriate for all of those activities I've just mentioned. So if you fall within Tier 1, you must comply with the relevant food standards. I'm not going to go into detail about those. A good way of thinking about it is that complying with the food standards requires that you take reasonable steps in all of the activities that you do around growing and producing and processing your produce to ensure that it is fit for human consumption. And so the food standards have the ability, because they use that language of reasonable measures, what is reasonable should and can vary depending upon your context and your circumstances. So that's not such a big deal. There is no evidence that any Tasmanian growers have failed to comply with the relevant food standards in any event. In addition, you must notify Biosecurity Tasmania of your name and address, a description of each activity that you undertake or plan to undertake in relation to the production of berries, leafy vegetables or melons. So, and also the locations at which each activity will be undertaken. Now, many submissions raised privacy concerns, particularly as this applies to people who are growing in their own homes. So where your location at which you engage in the activities is the same as your home address, Biosecurity Tasmania has said they will not publish the specific location of your operation, and so the information will not be readily publicly available. It is still, however, a public register which can be searched on request, and officers of biosecurity will have discretion about who they reveal that information to. So there will be a public register kept of that information, and I think significantly, Biosecurity Tasmania once you've notified them that you plan or are undertaking the activity, may periodically inspect your garden. And I've chosen that language of garden because a lot of the people who are affected by this Tier 1 notification are not farming, they're market gardeners, they're community gardeners, and they're home gardeners. Wait, there's more. So this doesn't apply to berry producers who fall within Tier 1. If you produce leafy vegetables or melons, Biosecurity Tasmania is not going to trust that you are complying with the food safety standards. They want to monitor that more actively, and so they want you to produce to them a food safety management statement to demonstrate your compliance with the standards. Now, they've made clear that you can tailor your statement to suit your business. That's the language they use, which in my view indicates how it's not appropriate, because most of the people affected by Tier 1 are not conducting a business. Now, they've said they're going to provide templates. It's not clear whether they're going to planning to provide different templates, but they have already provided some templates of food safety management statements. And frankly, it's a really scary looking 30-page document. So if you think about who is falling within this Tier 1, I think it's arguably an inappropriate bureaucratic requirement, but you need to form your own view about that. So this is what the leafy vegetable, this is some of the things that come up there. So you've got to anticipate what you're going to supply and what your activities are. You know, for home growers, if you're like me, it's more of an art than anything else, the way I grow my food. So I'm not sure I've got such a rigorous plan about it. Then there are things that look a little bit concerning, such as, have you undertaken a risk assessment on all activities being conducted at the site? And then there's a risk assessment template provided in an appendix. How appropriate is that for many of the people falling into this proposed tier, or proposed to be falling within this Tier 1? Traceability requirements. Now, I have clarified with Biosecurity Tasmania, if you are selling, for example, at the gate of your property, to passers-by at a roadside stall, you're not going to be required to gather data about the people who buy from you. It's more that you need to keep a traceability record of what produce you supplied at that stall. The purpose of traceability is obviously, if there is a problem, being able to recall products appropriately. How you manage inputs. So there's questions on this template about things like water, seeds and seedlings, chemicals, soil amendments, fertilisers, and compost. So lots and lots and lots of questions in this form. I think the note at the bottom of this slide indicates that Biosecurity Tasmania really seem to believe that there's a widespread problem of food producers using untreated or raw animal manures as soil amendments on their leafy vegetable crops. I think that's unlikely, but even if it was, surely those people could be dealt with one-on-one, and an educative program would overcome that problem. Okay, so what I think is wrong with Tier 1 notification, just a few things that I believe are inappropriate about it. It applies far too broadly to community swaps, donation and sharing, those normal human community local food system activities. The requirement that food safety management plans be submitted to and approved by Biosecurity Tasmania is really a quasi-accreditation, and this tier is supposed to not be an accreditation tier. I think it demonstrates a lack of trust, and I think that lack of trust probably goes two ways. If you look at the submissions, many of us don't trust that biosecurity will treat us fairly in this system. There's also no evidence that there's a problem, so it's complete overkill in my view. And the requirements are going to mean a lot of people choose not to engage in the activities that they would otherwise engage in, which inhibits rather than encourages healthy communities and local food systems. I would also like to note that these requirements contradict the Tasmanian government's own policies, including its food resilience strategy and its red tape reduction program. Now, they're my opinions. You might have different opinions. I just want to touch on what some other people said in their submission, so it's not just my opinion. I love this one. It is not clear if the compost pile has a rich smell and a good friable texture is adequate, or if biological testing by a laboratory is required by the regulations. Biological testing on a small scale isn't viable. So here, most home gardeners, it's the look, smell and feel of our compost that tells us that it's ready. We don't send it off to a laboratory to be tested. Providing small growers with sound information about the relevant pathogens and how to avoid contamination will be far more cost effective. It could be distributed through local councils, community and farmers markets, Sprout and other farmers groups. Give them information, not another bureaucratic obligation. And this submission noted from that draft statement, it asks growers to explain how they will keep E. coli levels in their pre-harvest water at less than 100 CFU per 100 mils without giving any guidance as to how that might be done. The answer to this question is actually fairly simple. Water that will touch the leaves of the crop should come from sources that do not have livestock access or high populations of water birds or runoff or seepage from septic tanks, manure piles or other such sources of dung bacteria. If Biosecurity Tasmania knew that this was the case, then you could easily have supplied the answer to the question rather than playing guessing games. For the grower, the question is daunting because they don't know what Biosecurity Tasmania is expecting to hear. Do you expect the water to be treated or tested daily? There is no reason that a grower would even know what 100 CFU per 100 mil means. They do know, intuitively, that they should not use dirty water on leaves that people will eat, and they have been doing a pretty good job so far of keeping Tasmanians safe with this knowledge. The paperwork and potential for expensive tests associated with the proposed regulations also run counter to the government's red tape reduction plan. We understand that some tiering is now planned but are nervous given the first proposal. Small growers should be required to take reasonable steps to ensure that food is safe, but we should not be treated like large growers who have long supply chains, larger revenues and deeper pockets. For context, we harvest most of our vegetables on the same day that we sell them, and we sell them within 20 kilometres of our farm. The risks are entirely different. The lessons of COVID and natural disasters are that we need more small growers supplying regional communities, not fewer. Small producers operating farm gate or roadside stalls are typically low volume, low risk businesses with simple supply chains. Imposing mandatory food safety management systems, extensive documentation, water testing regimes introduces costs that are disproportionate to the scale of their operations. The proposed requirements, including water testing and extensive record keeping, would impose significant new costs and administrative burdens. For small growers operating on narrow margins, this could mean ceasing production altogether, which would weaken local food security and resilience and would have a significant impact on the viability of our currently well-supported local food hub. So what are the alternatives to Biosecurity Tasmania's proposed Tier 1 notification? Again, this is my opinion. A much broader exemption for all home grower and not-for-profit community activities, in my view, would be appropriate. If you want to think about, okay, so how do we distinguish between the home grower and the small commercial grower? So the home grower who's selling a few things for a few cents in a roadside stall, compared to the small commercial grower who should be subject to the Tier 1 regulations. My submission suggested that the boundary should be guided by the Australian Taxation Office's definition of a hobby activity. And so if we excluded all hobby not-for-profit activities, then in my view that would be inappropriate. I think there is definitely a positive benefit and a rebuilding of the trust that does not exist for many community members in their relationship with Biosecurity Tasmania. It would be a positive thing if there was an educative and community engagement approach. So rather than have people sitting at desks processing these food safety management plans, making and keeping the public record of everybody who grows leafy herbs and vegetables in Tasmania, what Biosecurity Tasmania could use those resources for instead is an education and community engagement officer who could engage with the Tasmanian food growing community to help them to produce food in a way that's definitely not going to endanger people and that ensures that their produce is safe for human consumption. Again, there's no problem recorded with what's happening. There's just rumours that float around and they get said so many times that I think people start to believe them. There could be problems, and community education is an excellent way to approach regulation rather than imposing paperwork. I think it's fair to say that small commercial growers should be required to have a food safety management plan. I think that's reasonable, but they should not be required to submit it for Biosecurity Tasmania's approval because that's quasi-accreditation. I think there should be, again, educative and consultative processes to assist people to make those plans, but they should be trusted to comply with them because it's in their interest to comply with them. There's no need for a punitive and policing approach. I think it's really important that you tell Biosecurity Tasmania what you think. And so I would really encourage as many people as possible to make their own submissions. We've got until the end of July to do that. And on this slide is the link to how to do that.